It is primarily the concern with the transformation of resources into commodities. Very, very important as we are talking now. Marginal product, one additional product that can be derived by one additional input. We call it as marginal product. Total product as a total volume or amount or the final input produced by the firm using given inputs for a given period of time. Good morning and welcome to the third revision class in microeconomics, where we are going to speak about production and cost in second PUC economics. This is a very important chapter where we are going to understand the fundamentals behind production and the cost related to it. So what's the agenda for today? The agenda for today is very simple. We're going to talk about the chapter introduction, followed by the weightage, question types, and the question and answers. Now, this is very important. Why? Because this chapter also carries an equal amount of marks. So please do give importance to this chapter. Let's go to the weightage. Let's look at here. We have a 1 mark question. Yes, definitely you will be getting that 1 mark, followed by a 2 mark question that's coming up. So that is going to be 2 plus 1, 3 marks coming up, followed by 2 4 markers, which is 8 marks. So 11 marks coming out of this chapter. Look at this. 11 marks coming out of this chapter. The first chapter weightage is 6 marks, followed by 20 marks on the second chapter, and the third chapter is having 11 marks. So if you total it up, 37 marks, 3 chapters, and you have passed economics. Let me make it a clear statement here. 3 chapters, 37, you have passed. Out of the 12 chapters, just 1/4 of your effort. 3 chapters, you learn it thoroughly, you will get 37 marks and you have cleared the second PUC economics. That's so simple that we are talking about. Let's just move further and try to get introduced into this chapter called as production and cost. Now, what is production? It is primarily the concern with the transformation of resources into commodities. Very, very important as we are talking now. Why is this? It is primarily concerned with the transformation of resources into commodity. That means we are talking about a conversion of input to output. That's exactly what you mean by a production function here. Input to output. So many a times in the industries, we would have seen that there is a raw material available. The raw material will undergo a process of transformation and will finally get into a finished product. So that physical transformation is what we are talking about. So that's why I say physical inputs are used for the production. So the firm actually takes those raw materials, converts them into meaningful output. So that's why we call this, there's a relationship between the output and input factor altogether. Now, it displays the number of inputs that require and the highest level of final output. So at the end of the day, how much is going to be the output? That matters a lot for you in terms of understanding. So this is how things starts working about in terms of the production function. Now, what are the chapter summary? Production function, this is very, very important when we're going to talk about this factor. Production function, it is a function of labor and capital. So we are going to talk about so many other factors there. It's a land, labor, capital function altogether. But let me take into this factor. Whenever I talk about the production function, it is about the labor and the quantity. So it's a function of labor and quantity, the input versus that of the output, which I'm talking about. We're going to talk about short run curve, long run curve. Of course, yes, these are very important. So when I say short run, that means in a limited period of time, and a long run is definitely at a longer duration. Total product, marginal product, and the average product. These 3 concepts are very, very important in the third chapter. Now, what is a total product that we are talking about? The final product, which will not undergo any further changes, is called as total product. So there's not going to be any more transformation. There's not going to be any more changes. Total product is going to be the last and the final piece that you are going to take. That's what the product will be given to the consumer. Marginal product, one additional product that can be derived by one additional input, we call it as marginal product. So when you are going to increase your output, how do you increase? You increase it marginally. By increasing the input one by one, the output will also tend to increase. So that's what we call it as the marginal product altogether, followed by the average product. What is an average product all about? The average product is all about the sum total. It's an average value. So we are going to talk about total product divided by the factor called as L, that is the labor here, or it can be any other factor that is used in the production process. So this is what is the total, marginal and average product, followed by law of diminishing marginal product, which we are going to see. Variable proportion, it increases, gets saturated and then decreases, returns to the scale, that is also important. Cost function, which is there, it talks about how much we are included, which means we're going to talk about price into quantity factor here. Marginal cost, that one additional cost that gets added up to that system, followed by average cost, that is the total cost divided by quantity. So when TC divided by Q comes into picture, it's nothing but the average cost factor. Now let's go to the exam corner questions. So we will go question and answer here. It will be easier for you. So let me start with the total product. What do you mean by total product? This is one of the questions which is being repeated in your examination. So what is that answer to that? Total product as a total volume or amount of the final input produced by the firm using given inputs for a given period of time. So using the given inputs, whatever is the final product that is being generated, which will not undergo any further transformation, is called as your total product, followed by marginal product, the additional output produced as a result of employing an additional unit of the variable factor or input, is called as marginal product. Now this is very, very important. The additional output produced as a result of employing additional unit of the variable factor, it is called as marginal product. This is very, very important for all of us. So please do understand that this factor will make a lot of sense here. This is the extra product that we are generating, followed by cost function of the firm. Cost function is just the function of input prices and the output value. So whenever we are talking about the input factor and the output factor, there is a cost. Now the word cost itself means to say that some of the value, the utilizing value that we are talking about in terms of production. So whenever this comes into picture, please keep in mind it is the function that is in terms of input versus that of the output factor, followed by the what is the total fixed cost. Total fixed cost is a cost that does not change. This is the keyword, please keep in your mind. It does not change with the change in the level of output. How much ever an industry can produce, it can go and produce hundreds and thousands of products, but at the end of the day, the value, that is the cost factor, will not change. So that is why we call it as total fixed cost altogether. That's the simple factor that you have to keep in mind, followed by average cost, which means to say that defined as output per unit factor of the input. So that is where we have to say, whenever I have told you average cost, please keep this in mind, total cost divided by the quantity factor. So that's very, very important, total cost divided by the quantity here. So you will be able to see the output per unit factor of the inputs, which is very, very important for us, followed by the average cost, which is there. I have told you, because this comes also as a factor, TC divided by Q. Let's go to the 2 marks question. Iso-quant is a definite question. It is a curve that shows the combination, all the combination of input that yield the same level of output. Let me mark those keywords for you. All the combination is first keyword of the input that yields the same level of output. So whatever you try to do as an input, the output should not change. That's why we use that word very clearly. Iso means equal, quant means quantity. So equal quantity. So whatever you give as input, the output should remain the same. So that's why we say that it is a combination of all inputs that will yield the same level of output, Followed by the meaning of short run and long run. This is also an important question. Short run, which means we are talking about the time factor. If you look into a production house, now in the production house, if the timeline given for you to produce is less than 12 months or within 12 months, that means starting from the month of January till the month of December, if you have to produce something, the time factor given to you is limited, that is within 1 year. So now what will happen here is that the production constraints will be there. You will not be able to change the inputs or the output factor too much. So the variables are restricted and you just have to concentrate on production so that you are able to complete the production within the estimated time limit. So whenever I talk about short run production curve, that means to say that the production is within a particular time range. Now, this is inflexible in nature. It's fixed in nature. Long run is defined as over a time period where you will have the time to change the input according to the need of the hour. So for example, if they give you 10 years to produce something, so that's quite a long time where you will have an opportunity to change the prices, modes, whatever might be the variables and other factors. So that's why I would say that this is very, very important for us to understand in terms of the short run and the long run factor. Now, the next thing is that mention the types of return to scale, which is very, very important. Why? Because returns to scale are three types. That is the increasing to scale, constant to scale, and diminishing. So initially what happens is that you keep on producing, the returns keeps on increasing. At some point it becomes constant return and then it becomes diminishing return, which means even if the you start giving the input, the output does not change. So that's why we call it as increasing, constant, and diminishing factors altogether. So that's how the entire thing is being decided in terms of returns to scale. Followed by iso-quant with the help of diagram, the same concept we are going to do. But here, what's more important is the graph is going to be used. So as I've told you, though it's a 4-mark question here, but please understand, moment that 4-mark question is coupled with the graph, you will be able to score better than what is being prescribed. So I would always suggest that whenever you're looking into a question with a graph in a 4-marker, this will actually help you to work it out better. Followed by the 4-mark question where we're going to talk about the total product, the average product, and the marginal product. And the most important thing, they've asked you to quote it with examples. So you will first define what is a total product, the relationship between variable input and output. Then you're going to define the average product and the marginal product. You will give out an example for each one of them. Now, when you talk about the average product, as I have told you, TP by L, that means output per unit of variable input. Now, this is very, very important for all of us to understand. Output per unit by the variable input. So what happens here is that it is per unit. Because I'm using the word average, it is per unit that comes into picture. So that is very, very important for all of us. Followed by, we are also going to talk about the marginal product, which means to say that additional unit of output per additional unit of variable input. So that's also very, very important for us. So for each one of this thing, I would suggest that you would quote an example and write it. That will enhance your answers and you will be able to score better. Followed by the long run cost, where I have told you very clearly, in the long run cost, there will be a change in production function. The reason being is that you have the flexibility to change the input as per the requirement. So it is very important that when we are concentrating on the long run factor, you need to see that the concept of cost will change automatically. Why? Because the factors of land, labor, capital, goods, entrepreneurship will keep varying as per the demand, as per the supply factors. So the long run gives the opportunity for the organization to go further, explore, and then build the product as per the need of the customer. Whereas in the short run, we will not get this flexibility where we do not have the opportunity to do that. So that's why the long run cost is always considered to be an advantageous position for the organization. followed by the factors of returns to scale, which we have already seen, where we talk about the increasing, diminishing, and constant returns. Now let's get to the 6-mark question. The same thing has been also asked in the 6-mark, that is the total product, marginal product, and the average product. So you will define it with the diagram. That's the enhancing factor here. As I'm talking about the diagram, I always keep repeating, make sure that you draw the diagram with the pencil neatly, mark all the points that are necessary in the diagram, and give out a valid explanation. Please don't make it in such a way that the question, the answer are not related, and suddenly you just spook up with a diagram. Then that does not look good on the paper. So the diagram, the answer, everything has to be related in nature. Followed by the law of variable proportion. First it will be increasing, then decreasing, and then it continuously starts becoming negative. So that's how you are going to talk about the marginal product. Initially increases, then it becomes decreasing but still remains constant, and finally it continues to decrease and become a negative factor altogether. Now the last thing, with that we come to the end of this particular chapter. I hope and believe that all the questions and answers that are discussed in this session will be of great help to you, both in practical as well as from the theoretical standpoint. In the upcoming session, we will be talking about the theory of perfect competition, that is chapter 4. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.